Hello, I'm Debi O'Donovan, Director of the Reward and Employer Benefits Association, and I'm here today with Deborah Frost, who's Chief Executive of Personal Group.
Hi Debbie, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So Deborah, you've relatively recently taken over as Chief Executive of Personal Group, so I thought it would be very interesting to talk today about perhaps some of the trends and opportunities that you're seeing, particularly perhaps on the supplier market, given now that Personal Group has several parts to it with Inecto and so on, now part of the group.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was appointed from the 1st of March, so we're still very early days. And certainly going from being CEO of a company of 20 people to a CEO of 250 people is a bit of a jump. But it's been really interesting, and made particularly so by the fantastic people at PG who come up with so many different ideas and so many ways to support our customers. So, yeah, it's been a really interesting opening.
And since, well, probably before you took over as well, you must have seen opportunities and how the market was developing. Yeah. What kind of shifts are you seeing in our market?
I think one of the key things is that where previously benefits were primarily available to very large organisations, the advent of technology and the use of mobile phones as a means of communicating with people has really changed the whole game, really, particularly for organisations where people don't drive a desk. You know, they might be out and about, or they might be working in a care home or a shop, where actually it's not so easy necessarily to get onto a computer, but everyone can get their mobile phone into their pocket and find out information that the company wants them to see, find out about their payslip, or access discounts or benefits or whatever it may be that the company's trying to get hold of. And I think that plays to the whole wider holistic story around wellbeing and making sure that employees feel they can access what they need to at any time.
Great, I want to definitely come back to the wellbeing. I know that's a big theme, but I just want to pick up on what you were saying there about the employees and having mobile phones shifting the market. Do you think a lot of the shifts that we're seeing, and perhaps some of the other players in the market that are developing products, is that coming on the back of what's happening among employees and the employer demand? Or do you think it's more coming from what suppliers have available these days, technology? Where's the driver coming from for the changes?
I think it's coming from both, really. So the technology wasn't available as easily as it is now. But then when people see the technology, they're just like, oh, this is great. I can just use this in my pocket. And we were out doing investor roadshows only a couple of weeks ago, and I was showing the app, our app, the PG app, Happy, to some of our investors, and they were going, oh, that's really good, isn't it? It's just on your phone. I'm thinking, you're very sophisticated people, and yes, it is a really good app, but it's quite simple. So it shows really that I think the market has moved on from a static desktop intranet type approach in something that people can easily access whenever they need to. And that's the shift that we're seeing. And that, once it's offered by a supplier, I think what we're seeing is that employees are really jumping on the bandwagon saying this is what we need. It's being supplied to us in a way that we can use and that we find accessible. And actually we use it because we can do it while we're out and about, or particularly for employees who aren't based at a desk. You know, they might be driving a bus, they might be working in a care home. It's much easier for people to find that information when they need to, rather than when it's convenient for the employer.
So that's talking a lot about the vehicle that will get benefits to somebody or communicate. Are there other shifts more broadly that you're seeing? And our markets had to go through quite a lot with auto-enrolment now coming up for 6 years, gender pay gap, a myriad of other things driven by legislation. So in terms of what's being offered and how it's being offered, what else are you seeing out in the market?
I think the biggest thing that's driving the market, particularly for a lot of staff, is national living wage. So where the majority of employers who are operating in that space are finding it really hard to find the more or less 5% increases year on year that they've been asked to find. And actually we think that's going to continue for next year and the year after to hit the government target of about £9 an hour. And therefore what was the national minimum wage, now the national living wage, has almost become the national maximum wage because it's all that employers can afford and they can't find any pay differentials. So therefore being able to access benefits, whether it's on an app, whether it's on a desktop, it does make people feel a bit more valued. The problem is with the national living wage, it's been fantastic. It's transformed the way that people can earn money in relatively lower level jobs. but at the same time, it's the legal minimum you can pay someone. And there is a bit of a message there that says, I couldn't pay you less if I wanted to. But being able to offer some sort of benefits programme, I think is really, really attractive to employees and employers to make their employment force, the workforce, feel as though their employee is bothered about them beyond what they have to do.
There is sometimes a danger of doing that. Is it lip service? You know, have you put in some benefits just to cover the fact you're paying the minimum? Where would you say, if an employer had a choice, they put the money first? Increase the pay or give the benefits?
I think relatively speaking, the cost to increase pay is so much, it's difficult. Where employers seem to be doing it is to try and maintain differentials. So as the tide has risen with the national living wage, what they're trying to do is keep those differences between team leaders, supervisors, assistant managers and so on. But even for some companies in the hospitality sector and the retail sector, they're finding that those differences are just getting submerged in the rising tide of the employment market. So therefore, I would suggest that people do put it into pay where they can, but being realistic, offering a benefits solution instead can be a really good alternative provision for a much larger range of staff. The other massive change has been more or less full employment. And of course, I think that's led us on to the theme that we're all talking about around wellbeing, which says that where you've got members of staff who are in great demand, and you and I can remember when the war for talent was really technical people, professional staff, managerial level. Well, actually that's happening at all levels in an organisation now, and therefore high levels of employment means that employers have to work that bit harder to hang on to people, and that means showing them that they're bothered about them from a physical wellbeing, mental health wellbeing and financial wellbeing, and coming up with a coherent strategy across those three strands.
So on that well-being theme, again, thinking about where employers need to put their focus, because there can be, and we've all heard it, where there's a little bit of glossing over the top, where they just think, well, let's stick some foosball tables in and have drinks on a Friday, and that will sort out all our retention and talent problems. Which of course it doesn't. It's broader than that, isn't it, when it comes to well-being? You need to be thinking about the stress levels of staff, the pay of staff, and the benefits of staff. So where do you think that side of things shifting? Where are employers putting the emphasis now? Is it still feeling a bit like it could be a sticking plaster, or are you seeing a more focus on the culture of an organisation that's more of a deep dive from leadership?
I think that's exactly what you've just said is, I think, exactly what's right. So, for example, for employees who are working in a caring environment, they might be suffering more mental stress. If you're looking after people with Alzheimer's or somebody who's perhaps just caring for someone who's just died, then they might need more mental health support. But at the same time, there might be another environment where you're very conscious that you're working with male staff, predominantly a male workforce, and we know men aren't very good necessarily at asking for help with mental health. It might be that you say that this is the area we need to focus on. If you've got an employment group where people are quite sedentary, for example, you might be saying we need to focus on physical wellbeing, being active. And then there's other groups, female financial wellbeing is particularly poor. The pension gap, we talk about the pay gap, don't we? But the pension gap is massive. So if you've got a highly female workforce, should you be investing in employment advice, financial wellness advice on, with auto-enrolment, as the rates go up, the danger is people opt out. Something happens in their life and they think, I can't afford to pay the pension, so I'll take my contribution out, and of course you lose the employer's contribution. So perhaps focusing attention at that point and saying, for your female employees, it's easy for them to make the wrong choice at that point, and it will have massive changes for their life later on. So I guess my message to employers would be, you're right, don't put a sticking plaster on, think about where the money you invest will make the biggest difference to the real well-being of your staff, rather than just do what's fashionable.
It's interesting you made the comment about male employees and mental well-being in particular. Have you seen some good examples of what employers perhaps might be doing more for the men in their organisations?
I think there's a bit of a myth out there that men don't suffer from mental health problems as much as women, and yet if you look at the people who are homeless on the streets, or who have major alcohol problems, or who are in prison, they're all men, and they're all going there. They're not all men, the majority are men, and they're going there because it's often an outpouring of some mental health problem which hasn't really been addressed. It's really interesting. I was talking to an old member of staff at Inecto, and he works for Screwfix now, and he was saying they've gone into a big relationship with Mind for their tradespeople. So the trades that are going in, the plumbers, the electricians, the carpenters going into Screwfix, they give them a cups of tea and coffee as part of the deal. On the bottom of the mug, it's got Mind and Samaritan's numbers. And I think it's really important to think about really small things like that that can enable your male employees perhaps to access help when they need it. The PG employee helpline, very interestingly, over 50% of calls from men are after 11 o'clock at night. So they're phoning in private, obviously can't sleep, really worried about something, and that tends to be when those calls are made. And again, that goes back to having it accessible from a mobile, because it's no good if it's on the phone number's on the internet at work. You need it there when you can access it. So there's a whole load of stuff that employers are just starting, I think. We're really seeing the tip of the iceberg, but there's a whole load of other work underneath it to make sure that people feel their best when they're at work and see work as a positive part of their life, not a drain.
It's really interesting that you say that. We've almost come full circle back again looking at technology, but specifically looking at the data side, the kind of data that you're seeing. How do you think people should be using that themselves in an organisation to work out what they should be doing about wellbeing?
Well, it comes back to what we were saying about customisation, doesn't it, and making sure that your business is right, and perhaps being able to use the tools that are available to you. So going into the back engine of your benefit system, seeing what people are using. But just an example, you know, we talked earlier about an EAP provider. Why not find out from them in your business what are the things that they're getting calls about? Is it about debt management? Is it about bullying? Is it about feeling stressed? All of those things can help the HR community understand better what's driving their business and using technology to help us.
So, I mean, that kind of data will show what's happening now, which is really important. But if somebody's thinking about the plans that they're making for a wellbeing programme, perhaps you can use some of your insight into the market where you're sitting now to say what people might be seeing in the future. What are some of the interesting trends that you're spotting out in the marketplace?
I think what we're starting to see with employees is probably the same as we're seeing with customers. You know, employees are coming centre stage, and that means that really their benefits package should be customised to the power of one. You know, it's a case of being able to say what suits you, Debbie, what you might want to get from the employment benefits package at your firm might not be what I want, and being able to pick and choose what you want and make it fit your life is really important for you, and technology enables us to do that, and I see that happening more and more sophisticated organisations will be requesting that as part of the package that they're buying.
Have you got an example of an employer that perhaps has done something interesting with an app or with digital?
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting that I was just chatting over lunch and someone was telling me that one of the major leading retail banks has invested in a mindfulness app, so Headspace, with a coupon code for every member of staff. And you think, you know, using a meditation app and investing in that for everybody, 5 years ago that would have just been laughed out of the boardroom. But it shows how far and how fast we've come when we're looking at coming up with a holistic strategy around mental, physical and financial wellbeing for staff.
And that's what's so interesting about wellbeing, it's just how fast it is developing and how do we keep on top of it. But thanks for your insights today, Deborah. That was really, really interesting.
Yeah, good to see you again, Debbie.